So that's enough from me in terms of the introduction. Let's move on to the people you've really come here to listen to. And first of all, we have Dr. Cathrine Jansson-Boyd from Anglia Ruskin University, who's going to take us through a case study on behavioural change. Cathrine, over to you.
Thank you. So I'm just going to screen share to get up my presentation. So if you just bear with me for a second. I am hoping you can all see my screen share now. So I am going to take you on a whistle-stop tour of behaviour change and looking at other examples that might encourage people to think about how you can foster green transportation and encourage people to actually take part in that. So part of the problem that we always find when we're trying to change behaviors of any kind of consumer of bike riding or consumer of car driving, it doesn't really matter what it is that people tend to engage in behaviors that they've done for a long time without actually thinking about the impact of it. So part of the problem is if people engage in behaviors subconsciously, of course, is that if you are bombarding them with information, they have to think consciously about it. And that takes a lot of effort, and people aren't generally keen to do that. So if you want to reduce their kind of behaviors that they're currently engaging in, you might want to try to think outside of the box rather than presenting them with just information. Now, one of the obstacles we actually have if you are giving people too much information that requires some sort of effortful, conscious thinking is that it takes effort. People don't want to waste their cognitive resources necessarily on it. And because we're quite lazy when it comes to thinking things through, you might on occasion be better to make use of the kind of intuition and instinctive way of thinking in terms of the systems that we are actually using on an everyday to-day basis in regards to making decisions. So very few decisions and behaviors that we are engaging in are actually done by using effortful thinking. And if you want to try to sneak things in, you also need to be aware of that there is kind of like a stage process to changing people's behavior. And this basically goes on a loop, as you can see, and we would start with some sort of pre-contemplation, whereby you need to raise awareness. Now, this needs to be preferably fun awareness, not just loads of information that makes people have to engage in effort, because that will actually make them withdraw from the changing process. Then if you find that they do move on once they have the right kind of information in place, they might start contemplating change. And when you know that consumers are contemplating change, you will need to get in there and give them perhaps some support and some suggestions in regards to what they can do to effortlessly engage in change. And then let's say that we're looking at changing cycling behavior. You might need some preparation once you have been thinking about it. You need to help assist with support so that people can think about how can we do this? What can I do without having to put too much effort in? Because once you're saying, oh, you will need to consider X, Y, Z, and you give them lots of choices, again, they tend to withdraw from the process. And then, of course, hopefully, once you help them with the preparation, people will try it out. And then it goes on to maintaining this. So in the case of cycling, that means they would cycle consistently. And hopefully this will then continue and become almost habitual. So it's part of their integrated behavior so that they don't actually fall back into previous behaviors. Having said that, if they do relapse, maybe they used to drive, they then go on to cycling and then fall back into driving, you need to start to kind of the process again. So get people to think about it, and then so it keeps going on in a cyclical kind of process. Now, interestingly enough, as an example of trying to make things fun and effortless and getting people to engage, we conducted a study. So this isn't about driving or cycling, but it's just showing a process of getting people to engage in greener behaviors. So I was working on a project whereby a number of blocks in Wisbech were retrofitted so that we would reduce, or people who lived there would reduce their energy consumption. That was the general idea. But of course, we also know that sometimes it's not as straightforward as just implementing a nice retrofit. You might need to do something to kind of nudge the people who are the consumers of the buildings on to try to reduce the energy. And we did 3 different phases, and we also had a control group that lived in a building where there was no retrofit, and we didn't do very much to them in terms of we just kind of let them be, and they took part in the implementations, but we didn't give them any extra support in terms of energy reduction like we did with those who had to adjust to the retrofitted properties. So we started off with an educational phase, and this educational phase did nothing. The tenants rebelled against it, if anything, and didn't want to know. They were talking about that it was boring, they got too much information, feedback was really not very good. It's exactly what we expected, but we wanted to plant a seed in terms of the kind of cyclical process, if you like. Then we created a social belongingness phase. And here we were trying to get the tenants to connect with one another, to feel like they belonged to the building. And at the same time, we wanted them to connect with a greener environment. So we asked them to design a garden at the front of the house, for an example. We gave them little plants that they had to foster, and if they maintained them very well and they made them grow quite large, they would get a little reward for this. And we made them think about green aspects continuously. We also asked them to design little signs for the buildings whereby it said, please switch the lights off or reduce the heating. And they actually passed these on to the fellow tenants in the house. So they were very much engaged. So they felt like they were belonging, but all the belongingness was done through a kind of green communication pattern. And then in the final phase, we looked at self-awareness. We used an implementation technique of getting people to think about how they fitted in terms of the environment on a global basis. And we found, like I said, to start off with the educational phase didn't actually work very well at all. Social belongingness phase reduced energy consumption considerably, both in the control group and in the group that lived in the retrofitted house. And even better, the self-awareness phase made this made a continuation of the reduction happening in the tenants that was there. And interestingly enough, this little chart, it's just an example of 2 of the flats. We found that if you compared the a retrofitted flat with a non-retrofitted flat in terms of energy reduction, it's quite a similar pattern. So flat A, which is the solid line, is basically the retrofitted flat, and flat B, the broken line, is one where they just had implemented behavior change. And this kind of demonstrates, just as like I said, as an example, that actually it's not necessarily the kind of retrofitted structure that's making people reduce energy, but also the behavior, which means we can use behavior change in an effective way to encourage people to reduce their behaviors or change their behaviors. So what's particularly important when you're talking about behavior change is that you think about the obstacles. What are the obstacles in place? How can we help them overcome those obstacles? Working on the assumption that there is a model that fits everyone is always a big mistake because it doesn't work. People are quite individual and have different obstacles. And you need to look at the situation in which people find themselves. That's very important, because if you say everybody go out and buy a bike and people can't afford to buy a bike, then clearly that's a pointless exercise in itself. You also need to think about some of the key sort of structures of why people don't want to change their behaviors. You know, maybe you are that person with a midlife crisis who wants to drive a sporting car, and therefore it sort of self-completes who you are. So if you're saying to them, please don't drive the sport car, they're going to be upset because it's part of what they want to present to society where they stand. you also need to think about what others are doing, because if everybody else is doing the wrong thing, that's what people's going to focus on. So you then need to think about how you're presenting the information, so that the information is somehow framed away from what people are currently doing, and try to get people to positively compare themselves to those who are doing the right thing, as it can really increase their self-esteem. And make sure the communication is clear. Oh, so many times when I worked on behavioral change programs, how I found that what they're telling people or the information they're trying to sneak in is so ambiguous, and people are left with a massive question mark on their face as they have no idea what to make of it. Also, when you think about behavior change, never ever try to take a big leap. It doesn't work. If people are reluctant, you can't change their behaviors. You need to start with very, very small changes and then build on that further. Because if you don't, it's never going to happen, basically. And show them that you are there to support them in whatever way you can, so that they're not feeling they're the only ones that's struggling with this. So on that happy note, I think my 10 minutes are up. So I'll say thank you very much and hand back to Martin.
Cathrine, thank you very much for that. A fascinating insight into behavioural change, and a good case study for us to take a look at as well. Just a reminder to everybody, do post any questions you've got through the chat box, and we'll start to introduce those at the end of the next speaker. Now, moving on to that speaker, when I was growing up, my mum said to me, Martin, if you can't get a good job, get one with a good title. And I've got to say that the title of Anne Coppens' job role is incredible. It's the Chief Game Changer. Now, I should qualify this, and I don't mean you've got a rubbish job at all, of course. It's a fantastic job, and we know that because we've been working with you. I should say as well, you work for Gamification Nation, which is a company based in Belgium. But you're working with us on one of our European programs called Mobimix, which is looking at how to introduce different types of low carbon transport into historic urban centres. So I think with no further ado, Anne, I will hand over to you to give us the case study about your city. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Martin, and thank you for the lovely endorsement of my title. So yes. If you can pick your own title, you have to pick a good one. So, so I want to present the case study of the city of Bruges, and basically how they chose gamification as a way of encouraging behavior change. And it's actually interesting how we build on some of the findings of Cathrine without having been aware. So I'm glad that aligns. So that's really good. Our project is called Carbon Zero Commute. So very simple. We want to make the commuters make a very distinct choice of how they travel. So first of all, some of the similarities between Bruges and Cambridge, and I think, Martin, you mentioned some. There's both have a historic center. Some in Belgium, you have very narrow streets in parts. In Cambridge, that's also the case, but maybe not everywhere. It attracts many visitors. In summer, it's overrun by tourists. In winter, less so, but a lot of people are commuting from the wider area in Flanders to join their workspace or school or university or hospitals. In terms of population, not dissimilar either. So I think there's many things that are the same. What Bruges did and already wanted to achieve with previous projects is they wanted to choose gamification as a way of nudging citizens towards carbon-friendlier commuting. In their research, they found that actually the 7-kilometer radius outside of the city is where people still walk to work or choose to cycle to work. Anything beyond 7 kilometers, they basically said people will opt for the car or public transport. So what they have as an infrastructure around all of the main transport, inward transport hubs, like the train station, the bus station, they have now bike stations so that you could technically walk from there into the city, and then they encourage people to actually use public transport instead of. the car. So why did we think gamification could work? Well, actually, in Singapore, there was already a gamification project that worked really well, where they basically had a 7.5% behavior change with read time, remode, reduce. The idea was that most people tend to travel into the city at the same time and out of the city at the same time. So really encouraging really peak. And what they wanted to do was spread that out. And that is similar to the problem that Cambridge faces and similar to the problem that Bruges faces, that there are sort of really big peak times of the day where people just travel into the city and then on the way out, the same thing. So what we designed is go for carbon zero. So 7-kilometer radius being the sort of the key critical point. We wanted to make it a mobile application, very much on brand with the City of Bruges branding. And basically the idea of building that social aspect and doing it as a work initiative or a school initiative or university initiative, so that you have a green team going on and the city could support that, or just even a city challenge. And the idea is that you challenge your friends or your colleagues to go for carbon zero. You sign up to the application, very similar to other application signs up. We do capture whether they're a resident because it really is aimed at residents, but we could envisage one for tourists as well. So because it helps. Then you have a similar screen to some of the mobility apps that are on the market. We said select your regular commuter place or commuter method. So walking, cycling, there's a cycle taxi in Bruges, the NMBS is the train, and the line is the bus transport. And then obviously you have still the car options too. You enter your location of work and your location of home. So to keep it as simple as possible, you record it once, it stays in the application. And then basically it tracks your trip. And whatever method you chose, you start your trip, you track it, and then you get points based on the carbon emissions that you produce. Now, the idea is to go for zero. So we want to give them small rewards for carbon zero choice. So carbon zero choices are walking, cycling, but we also have to include some of the carbon friendly cars. The idea is that just once won't have a big impact. So we want to encourage you to do it more than once. So first day at carbon zero, you get 1 badge, 5 days, 10 days, holding a 10-day streak. So 10 days in a row of commuting to carbon zero again. The idea is that you're on a leaderboard with the people you know, and that you sort of encourage one another to stick with it and to do more. So we see it very much as a campaign-based solution that people can do either for themselves, just to challenge themselves, but we think it will work better when done together. So potentially useful additions, we spoke to the City of Delft as well, is the ability to keep your distance when they're on public transport and not just to encourage off-peak commuting. So is sort of going towards the module of Singapore, where they're also basically encouraging different time frames. And doing that, we would say, we'd use the color schemes that they're already used to from travel. So the traffic light systems, where basically you say that orange or red is not the best to travel if you're on public transport, is that the nudge there could be go take a coffee sponsored by a local coffee place. So it really relies on geolocation infrastructure. It does rely on feeding and good feeds from the transport authorities to feed into the application. The orange part we thought were the ones that we could probably influence more than the red and the red ones. Reason being is that the red ones are most likely to need to get to a place at a certain time, whereas the orange ones may still have, which given an ethical bribe, as we call it, a nudge to actually take a different choice. If we already know that they're more open to traveling in comfort, so for example, the older age groups, maybe people with disabilities, etc., who already are more limited, we thought, well, you know, comfort creatures, they do exist. So if you know and you have flexibility on when you start, let's reward them for taking off-peak and create loyalty towards off-peak. So we also took the input from passengers as key. We see that both on some of the London trains, some of the fast commuter trains, and also in Sweden we see that, where you can indicate I'm in this part of the train, and basically I'm telling you my seats, there's loads of seats around me, or there are no seats at all. So then we also have the opportunity to take feedback on the journey once they've reached their destination, and basically, did you have a seat? Did you take up a nudge offer to see how successful those things are? But we see those as additions, and we also want to nudge them to stay off-peak and reward them more if they travel off-peak. What's really important in gamification is that the rewards are meaningful and relevant. So for the city of Bruges, we said maybe things that help the city of Bruges, but also the citizens make the right decisions. It could be coupons to events, could be things that the city puts on specifically to take part in. So it's very much relating to what you're trying to achieve as a city. If you're a local business and you want to take part maybe in business opportunities or in school opportunities to win something, that can be done. And again, using the city as a way to encourage, so there could be an award for the most green company, the most green school, the most green class. So there's ways of playing with that. In our research for the application, we came across commuter research for the London Underground, and it was fascinating to us that commuter emotions change super quickly. So if we can basically tap into that this was done for TfL, so it was a study carried out on behalf of TfL. So on time, people are happy, relaxed most of the time, or indifferent and bored, whichever way you see it. But if delays are starting, it is fascinating how quickly that descends into unhappy and disgruntled. So when I listened to the presentation from Lewis Herbert last week, I sort of felt, okay, there's definitely something that can be managed here. Seats for the journey. So we are creatures of comfort. So that's why the access to having a seat part to our app, we think could definitely work. And the types of people they tracked, it was over a 4-month period every day, and the different commuting tracks that were taken and the different types of tickets were taken. So each of these graphs represents a different kind of persona of user. So we had somebody that went to work every day by train, somebody that was much more of a casual commuter, and a student who had more flexibility in terms of hours. So the things that had positive impacts: communication, being open about having a problem, and then expectations on how you would solve it, and then information before and after travel. If you were able to be productive whilst commuting, that also helped. And it was all about the small things, not about the big things. It was, you know, getting the feedback, look, your train is going to be late, this is what's happening, we expect the train to be there at that time instead. That was considered positive. And yeah, if you do that consistently well and it's consistently right, people are more likely to give you that extra bit of trust. So yeah, that's what we do. We're actually based in London. I'm originally from Belgium, as a Belgian national, so feel free to reach out at any point. So that's all we have for now.